You know, history is just packed with these forgotten empires, right? But what if one of them, one we barely even remember, holds a secret key to the identity of millions of people alive today? Well, that's what we're digging into. We're talking about a powerful, mysterious, and incredibly influential empire that has somehow been almost totally erased from our maps, the Khazars.
And that's really the big, provocative question at the very heart of the Khazar story. It's this wild idea that kind of blurs the lines between ancient history, modern identity, and some really deeply rooted beliefs. So, where do we even start? Let's go looking for clues.
Okay, so first piece of evidence. Take a good look at this artifact. What we have here is a coin, right? It's from a powerful Turkic empire out on the Eurasian steppes. But look closer. See that symbol stamped on it? That's the seal of Solomon, what we now call the Star of David. So the question is, how on earth did it get there? This one single object, this coin, just perfectly captures the whole puzzle of the Khazar people.
In a puzzle like that? Well, it leads us straight into a really fascinating and, frankly, highly controversial idea, the 13th tribe theory. It poses this fundamental question about the origins of a huge portion of the world's Jewish population. But before we can even get into that whole debate, we first have to understand the empire itself.
So let's back up. Who were the Khazars exactly? To figure that out, we've got to go back in time and really explore the rise of this pretty remarkable and, as we said, now mostly forgotten kingdom.
Okay, to really get why the Khazars were so important, you have to understand one thing: their location. This wasn't some remote, isolated tribe we were talking about. No way. They controlled a massive empire that was positioned at the absolute crossroads of the medieval world. I mean, their geography was their destiny.
Just look at the sheer scale of their territory on this map. We're talking about more than 3 centuries, from around 650 to the late 900s, where the Khazar Khaganate just dominated this vital corridor between Europe and Asia. They controlled everything that moved through it: goods, ideas, even armies. To put it simply, they were a global superpower of their time.
And their position was just completely unique. Picture this. To their west, you've got the powerful Christian Byzantine Empire. To their south, the rapidly expanding Islamic Caliphate. And who's standing right between them? The Khazars. But they weren't just caught in the middle. They were the essential third power, a crucial buffer state that was literally holding the balance of the known world.
And believe me, this wasn't just some political standoff. Look at the arrows on this military map. The Khazar armies were basically the wall that for centuries stopped the caliphate from pushing north into Eastern Europe. Their military might literally shaped the religious and cultural map of the entire continent in ways we hardly ever talk about.
But their influence wasn't just military. It was also deeply personal, right up to the highest levels of power. Get this. In the 8th century, a Khazar princess, her name was Chichek, she married the guy who would become the Byzantine emperor. And their son? He eventually ruled the entire empire, and everybody just knew him as Leo the Khazar. That's how deeply connected these powers were. So, this unique position, it brings us to maybe the most remarkable chapter in their entire story. See, being squeezed between 2 religious superpowers meant the Khazars had a choice to make. But this wasn't just a simple matter of faith. It was a calculated conversion, a brilliant strategic move that would end up defining their legacy.
Think about the dilemma they were in. It was an existential threat, really. If they adopted Christianity, they'd basically become a puppet of the emperor in Constantinople. If they chose Islam, they'd have to answer to the caliph in Baghdad. So, how could they possibly stay independent?
Well, their solution was just an act of pure geopolitical genius. Let's break down the logic here. Step 1. Resist the pressure from the Christians. Check. Step 2. Resist the pressure from the Muslims. Check. Step 3. Find a respected Abrahamic faith that belongs to neither superpower. And the result of that? Step 4. They convert to Judaism, and in doing so, they secure their political and cultural independence from both empires. Absolutely brilliant.
At its core, this was a choice for sovereignty. And it's really important to get this part. The conversion was mainly among the Khazar elite. The king, the nobles, the ruling class. The empire itself, it was actually famous for its religious freedom. It was a place where pagans, Muslims, and Christians all lived and worshiped freely, all under their Jewish rulers.
Now, like all empires, the Khazar Empire did eventually fall. It was overtaken by rising powers like the Kiev Rus. But their story doesn't just end there. Not at all. Their influence didn't just vanish into thin air. It echoed down through history in some really surprising ways. So let's trace some of those echoes. And their legacy is surprisingly widespread.
For instance, some historical accounts actually suggest they founded the city of Kiev, and that its original name, Kiev, was a Turkic phrase for riverbank settlement. They also played a critical role in the very beginnings of the mighty Seljuk Empire, and they're even considered possible ancestors of the Karaite Jews, a really unique community of Turkic-speaking Jews that still exists today.
Let's just zoom in on that Seljuk connection for a second because it's pretty incredible. Seljuk Bey, this is the guy who founded a dynasty that would go on to conquer Persia and Anatolia. His father was a commander in the Khazar army. Seljuk himself almost certainly grew up in the Khazar court. And maybe the best proof is in the names he gave his sons. Mikhail, Yunus, Musa, and Israel. Michael, Jonah, Moses, and Israel. Those are Old Testament names, and they really point to a deep, deep cultural link.
Okay, and all of this, the power, the conversion, the legacy, it brings us full circle, right back to that big controversial question we started with. Now that we have all this historical context, let's actually confront the 13th tribe debate.
So the theory, which really blew up after Arthur Koestler's 1976 book, basically argues this. When the Khazar Empire finally collapsed, its people didn't just disappear. They migrated west and north. And in this version of history, they became the foundation of the massive Ashkenazi Jewish population of Eastern Europe. So in short, it's proposing a Turkic origin, not a Middle Eastern one, for millions of Jewish people.
Now, we have to be clear, this isn't just some dusty academic debate. This historical theory carries immense political weight today. It's sometimes used by different groups to challenge the ancestral connection of Ashkenazi Jews to the Levant, essentially reframing a people's identity to serve modern political arguments.
But, history is almost never simple. And if you look a little closer, you see why we need some nuance here. On the left, we have that Khazar artifact with the six-pointed star. Okay, but look at the image on the right. That's the exact same symbol, the Seal of Solomon, decorating an Ottoman mosque. The point is, back then, this symbol wasn't exclusively Jewish at all. It was used across different Abrahamic traditions. It's just a really powerful reminder that we have to be so careful about projecting our modern ideas about symbols onto the past.
So where does that leave us? What's the consensus today? Well, while the theory is absolutely fascinating, the crucial point is this. The idea that Ashkenazi Jews are descended on a large scale from the Khazars, it's just not supported by the vast majority of mainstream historians and genetic studies. Most of the evidence we have continues to point to a primary origin in the Middle East.
The Khazar Khaganate is long gone. Its great cities have turned to dust. But their story, their ghost, it leaves us with this really powerful, maybe even unsettling question that feels more relevant than ever. And it's this. Who gets to write the history of a people after they vanish? And what happens when their story becomes a battleground for the living?